Good afternoon. It's Friday the 23rd of July, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the program, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, we're getting straight on with the pingdemic. It is here, Patrick. Well, we've been talking about this for a few days, although the pingdemic term has now become mainstream headline. On Monday's program, I think it was, we mentioned that people saying that we were not coming out of lockdown at all because, in fact, we were just substituting one kind of lockdown for another. Some people saying that 1.7 million people had been pinged and therefore expected to self-isolate and stay in their homes.
So you can see this poor woman is terrorized here, Mike, but she's terrorized not by COVID, but by the app, by the fear of being pinged. We have a virtual pandemic happening now, thanks to the wonders of technology.
Absolutely. Now, 1.7 million was the number that was being bandied around on Monday. The BBC today saying more than 600,000. So is it clear what that means? Does that mean 600,001 people, or does it mean 1.7 million? It's pretty unclear what that means, but there you go.
There's
That's
a big
their headline.
discrepancy between 1.7 million and 600,000, right?
Yes.
A little bit of, it's beyond the margin of error, you could say, right?
So that's the number of people that have been told to self-isolate by the COVID-19 app itself. So perhaps the disparity is other people that have been phoned up by Serco personnel to be told personally. That
Twice as many people by those numbers, right?
Yes.
So how do we know who to believe? Do we trust the government's claims on any of the statistics or the data?
Well, of course, one of the main problems that has arisen out of this is apparently the supermarket shelves are empty. We'll be coming on to that in a moment. But in the meantime, Patrick, how has this happened?
Well, it's just, it can go anywhere. And the pingdemic's hitting households. We see reports of the Bluetooth is pinging people through walls. And so this is going to confuse a lot of people, Mike, and nobody more so than, well, there's the app there, but nobody more so than Caroni himself is completely confused by this whole scenario. And not only that, we've got traffic, Mike. There's reports of the possibility here. I mean, we're talking about what, 2 meters?
Yes.
Distance on Bluetooth. So again, it's the app terrorizing drivers as well. So what should people do? Can you escape the pingdemic? Well, this is all thanks to our dear leader, Mike, Boris Johnson there, who's marshaling this great success of COVID response here. And again, this is just leaving more confusion for our friend Caroni as well. So where are we heading now? Look, the problem with the tech, Mike, is not a new question. We can go right back. I have a bevy of reports here. Bluetooth bugs are making contact tracing apps spit out tons of errors. This is Wired magazine back in the fall. And then again, just another report here, NHS app, why the COVID track and trace app's reliance on Bluetooth makes it completely unreliable, according to experts. And we're talking about Bluetooth, it's got a range of 10 to 30 meters. So how could they be accurate on 2 to 3 meters in terms of calculating that? The answer is they can't.
That's correct.
Because of radio waves and the nature of radio waves. So the whole thing, this whole idea behind the NHS app and track and trace and making it all digital is very dodgy technology, Mike, and it's hardly accurate, and it's actually destroying and terrorizing the lives of many people who are worried if they can actually go to work, if they're going to have to stay home, lose income, and all sorts of other disruptions in their personal life as well.
Indeed, and of course, we've got to go back to the start of July to see how this has happened, because this is the BBC and they've got a nice little video clip with Grant Shapps on there. NHS COVID app may change as rules change, Grant Shapps says. So let's have a look at what he actually said. As our restrictions change, of course, the app needs to change. Things like replacing the 1 meter plus rule on the 19th of July might well lead to a review of the way the app itself needs to function. Many people have been talking, suggesting that the app sensitivity has been turned up in time for the 19th of July. And that seems to be the case, but Grant Shapps certainly seems to be suggesting that that's something that the government was looking at, and it looks like that's what they have implemented. So if people are suffering as a result of hypersensitivity of this app, never mind the limitations of Bluetooth as a technology in the first place, well, perhaps this is part of the explanation as well.
So we need to change the rules. So the rules weren't good enough. when they rolled it out, Mike?
No.
Is that what he's admitting?
No, because now that the there's much more freedom for people to get close to one another,
Ah,
then we've got to be making sure that we capture everyone that might have been in contact with someone who might have had maybe a PCR test that tested positive for one of several variants.
maybe we should stop people from having conversations in passing. Actually, they're trying that down under. We'll get to that later on
Yes.
in our report, Mike. So, but you talked about empty supermarket shelves here, and so here we go. The Times has announced, Mike, that the fear is over because food supply staff are freed from COVID quarantine. So we saw all these sort of reports about empty supermarket shelves. Whether those are true or not, we'll show you in a minute. But again, what do we see here? What's going on? There's two rules for essential and non-essential. So if you're essential, you don't have to isolate. You're clear of the pingdemic, so you're safe from the pingdemic. But if you're non-essential, you go in with the sort of the
Great unwashed.
the great unwashed. Very good. Pinged workers don't have to isolate here. This is the Guardian again, Mike. So the same sort of thing. And it doesn't even stop with key workers. I think this probably extends to government as well, right?
So then the question is, are the supermarket shelves empty? Are the your supermarket shelves empty?
I've been in a few supermarkets in the last couple of days, not to buy anything, of course, just browsing, but all the shops shelves are full, Mike. So where are all these empty shelves? Where are these Soviet bread lines coming from? I don't know.
Well, the BBC on the 10 o'clock news last night was absolutely clear about it. So here, let's have a little look at an excerpt here. We're not going to listen to this because nobody wants to hear it, but this is all about coronavirus self-isolation. And you can see they had nice images here of the empty shelves. This is fantastic stuff. Empty boxes of fruit.
Shocking.
Absolutely shocking. We've got to be afraid because we're not going to get. And look at this, empty shelves.
Poor guy here scratching his head, Mike.
Scratching his head because there's nothing to get, and they then went to George Eustice, who explained the nature of the problem. Now, if anybody was watching that closely, they might have spotted something. So let's come back to the previous scene and just take a still from that. What's the problem with this picture, Patrick? Well, let's have a look. It was 30 what degrees yesterday in London? 30, certainly around 30 degrees in other parts of the country, and yet this guy seems to be wearing a fleece. And if we head down to the people at the back here, they've got winter coats on.
You got a Russian hat on, even the guy in the back.
Yeah, so
Must be cold.
So I'm sorry, BBC, but once again, you've been caught with your pants down because you're presenting an image of empty shelves, which has not happened. It's not reality. It hasn't happened yesterday. You haven't sent your reporters out with your £4 billion budget in order to get shots of empty shelves yesterday. You chose to take some archive footage from March last year, whenever the first lockdown kicked in, when the shelves were actually empty for a couple of weeks. And you've presented it as if it is happening now. And once again, Patrick, we have the BBC doing something. They've got their disinformation expert in Marianne Spring. Is she going to be investigating her colleagues here? I don't think so.
I mean, it's just outright bad propaganda. In the BBC's defense, they'll probably say that the reason they were bundled up, Mike, is because they were standing in the poultry section, and the refrigeration was turned up because of the heat, and that's how they'll get out of that.
So they knew they were going into the fridge section, so they brought a coat along with them. Is that it?
Yeah,
Right.
and a Russian hat, a furry hat. And
Yeah,
everything.
good. Okay.
So
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I
Yeah,
feel much better now.
I'm pining for a job with the disinformation department
Yes.
at the BBC.
Okay. So where does that take us? What about school children then?
Well, here, this is a new Oxford study here suggesting, they're not suggesting, they're saying that forcing children to self-isolate is needless, basically. So then they're sort of falling back, Mike, on the idea that testing is sufficient. You don't need to have send the whole class home if they've been in touch or in contact or in close proximity with somebody who tested positive. But again, this is the establishment's kind of controlled opposition position. Instead of saying that it's ridiculous to do mass testing on children all the time and how disruptive this is, not just to schools, but to society in general, to families, households, everything. They're backing off on the isolation, but saying, no, but just keep testing. And so, but the problem is that the problem's not going to disappear by doing that. And so the problem is mass testing. That's the problem. And the provenance of the testing is wildly inaccurate and is actually not fit for purpose. And it can never be considered as any kind of legitimate diagnostic test. That's what the real science says. This is what many of the experts around the world have said repeatedly for the past 15 months or whenever, since they've been using PCR tests. And governments have completely ignored it, and the media have given them totally a free pass on this. And even some of these establishment think tanks doing these studies, they're not bringing in the problem with the testing itself is corrupted because the tests themselves are not diagnostic tools. They're not even close to being diagnostic tools.
Okay, so the question in my mind is what kind of winter are we going to have? And I have to say that I think it's going to be pretty grim, but I'll explain why I say that now. But we're going to start off here with Imperial College. And this is from the 15th of July, and it says winter viruses and COVID-19 could push NHS to breaking point, warns new report. Now, the key point here is the NHS is already at breaking point. It's already full. And so any additional capacity problems over the winter is going to cause the NHS problems. We'll come on to why that is in a second. So what are they saying here is that COVID-19, influenza, and the respiratory virus, respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, could push the NHS to breaking point this winter, a new report says. The report from the Academy of Medical Sciences draws on expertise from Imperial academics, including Professor Azra Ghani, Wendy Barclay, and Peter Openshaw, among leading researchers from other institutions and members of the public. The report, looking ahead to the winter of 2021-22 and beyond, aims to forecast the greatest risks to health this winter and was commissioned by the government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance. And they say that the risks include a potential surge in respiratory viruses, potentially having to continue to deal with the current, what they describe as third wave of COVID-19, as well as multiple subsequent outbreaks between summer of 2021 and spring of 2022, meaning that the NHS cannot catch up with the backlog of routine care. And they said the NHS is already under pressure, so it's likely to be less able to cope. And they also highlight, worse physical and mental health in the UK population, including that due to delayed diagnosis and treatment and other impacts of the pandemic. Now, it should be pretty obvious to people as I was reading through that, that of course, everything that they've identified there, and we'll be making this point again in a second, everything they've identified there has been as a direct result of lockdown itself, right? So what is RSV? Well, here's The Guardian. Parents urged to look out for RSV and other infections for children. RSV is, the World Health Organization has estimated in 2017 that RSV causes around 33 million serious respiratory infections a year. And this causes more than 3 million hospitalizations and nearly 60,000 deaths in children under 5 years of age every year in a global population of 7.5 billion. Right, so 60,000 deaths out of 7.5 billion is what we're looking at here. That's the scale of it, but we've got to be extremely scared of it. This winter, it's coming to get us, Patrick. Of course, it's not coming alone. It's coming in cahoots with Corona himself.
Joining
forces with influenza A and B.
This reminds me of WWF wrestling tag teams, Mike.
Yes, this is exactly what's going on. So here is the CDC talking about RSV. And saying, you can read that for yourself if you want, it's basically usually causes mild cold-like symptoms.
Mild.
So where is the fear? Where's the reason for fear? There is no reason for fear here. How many of the deaths caused by RSV happened in countries where basically there is no healthcare, where there's no standard of living, where actually the biggest problem for the people that are living there is probably malnutrition more than anything else. But we've got to be worried that RSV is going to kill us this winter. Now, let's just remind ourselves what Sajid Javid said about NHS waiting lists, and this is why I think the winter season this year is going to be grim. The NHS is already at full capacity. And a couple of weeks ago, Sajid Javid said, what shocked me the most was when I was told that the NHS waiting list is going to be a lot worse before it gets better. It's gone up from 3.5 million to 5.3 million as of today. And I said to officials, so what do you mean a lot worse? Thinking maybe it goes from 5.3 million to 6 million or 7 million. They said, no, it's going to go up by millions. It could go up as high as 13 million. Hearing that figure of 13 million has absolutely focused my mind. It's going to be one of my top priorities to deal with because we can't have that. So